Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Extension Podcast on wiregrassgrowing.com. I'm Micah Johnson, Houston County Extension Director.
And I'm Aaron Wells, Extension Agent for row crops here in the southeast part of the state.
In today's episode, we got a special guest coming in. Meteorologist David Paul will be here to discuss weather patterns in the current drought situation and how it's affecting the ag community, what can be expected for the summer and on into the harvest. So looking forward to that conversation. We'll bring a lot of insight to some decisions that our growers need to be making, and bring some more in-depth analysis about what the weather pattern is currently doing, some changes that are in the near future, we hope. We've had a few chances of rain here and there, but nothing really beneficial to this point. But that will be coming up soon. As far as extension events go here, coming up, we have, again, said it a few times, but I just enjoy saying this, Tomato de Mayo, and you follow on Monday, May 4th. But we have a series of programs called Moving You. This is a consumer-focused program that a number of our agents will be heading up. There'll be one in Luverne, one in Dothan, Ozark, Hartford. The dates and locations are on the Wiregrass Grown website under the calendar, or you can go straight to the extension website and find them there as well. There'll be a Serve Safe training along with cottage food training in New Broughton, May 6th and 7th. We have the Wiregrass Master Gardener Lunch and Learn in Dothan, May 20th from noon to 1. There will be a farmer's market vendor training in Headland toward the end of May, May 29th. And, there's a crop scouting short course June 2nd. That sounds like it's far away, but we're about to be in May. We're recording this on April 27th. So May starts Friday, and then we're into the summer, and there will be a crop scouting short course June 2nd in Headland. But all these events can be found on wiregrassgrowing.com under the calendar tab, and they will take you to the extension link for registration and for any other information you might need. So check out the website, check out the calendar, the other information that's listed on that page. So today, David Paul's coming in, knows a little bit about weather. I'm going to try to get some insight on some decisions. And Aaron, you've talked to a lot of people here recently, a lot of decisions to be made on planting. Some cotton's going in, hope for some rain. So what do you think out there?
Which I'm tickled to death to have David Paul with us today because I'm kind of a weather dork myself and I always really enjoy watching him. So it does a great job for our guys and well respected in the farming community too. So right now there's been some cotton, our corn's planted. A lot of folks are starting to side dress corn or finishing up side dressing corn. For dry laying corn, we really need some rain to get that fertilizer incorporated into the ground, that nitrogen incorporated into the ground so the plants can take it up and utilize it. Cotton's been planted last week. There was a lot that was kind of dusted in. There's been some peanuts planted as well. Obviously we can plant those a little deeper, so there might be some subsurface moisture. Folks still have that. So, but all the cotton that's planted, people are they're planting it just hoping for a rain, just kind of planting it real shallow. So, but we definitely we're not just really far behind right now on the planting calendar. But if we don't see some beneficial rain bar here soon, we probably will be in the kind of I don't want to say a dire straits, but more of a, hey, let's be really concerned about this kind of situation. So it's about that time. It is. It's getting that time, sure. Last part of April, 1st of May. So
we've already seen some programs come out because of the drought. They'll let these.
The livestock forage program is that's for your livestock growers. It's based strictly on the drought monitor. Once a growing season for a particular crop, whether it be Bermuda grass, Bahia grass, some type of your permanent grasses like that, once the growing season starts, depending on where you are in the drought monitor, if you're a D1, D2, D3, D4, it triggers some assistance to help offset some of the feed costs, the extra feed costs that are incurred because there's the grazing's not there, and so people are having to buy supplemental feed. So folks need to check on that. Go to their local FSA office. If you had any winter grazing planted and certified, then LFP is also available for that winter grazing crop in our area as well. So check into that with your local farm service agencies on that. And I know there was I guess a disaster declaration issued last week or week before last that opened up some emergency loans. If you're in a situation, those can be a little difficult to obtain, or sometimes, you know, situations like this, a loan may help you, get you through a rough spot, but that's typically, I mean, it is what it is. It's a loan. It's expected to be repaid. So, um, that is available. You can check with your FSA offices on that as well. But the big thing is your livestock forage program. And Southwest Georgia's in worse shape than what we are. I know it's hard to believe. Southwest Georgia is even more intense drought than Southeast Alabama. And even like if you look at those drought maps, Jackson County, Florida is bad as well. So anyone here in the Wiregrass is going to qualify for that LFP program.
Yes, it's just hard to believe that the drought like it is, one's worse than the other, but dry is dry.
Yeah.
And it's hopefully coming to an end soon.
So
At some point, we plan to see some rain, hopefully right around the corner. But that's what Mr. Paul's going to talk to us about. He'll be up next, and we're glad you're with us again. And up next, meteorologist David Paul. Hey, everybody. As mentioned, we have meteorologist David Paul with us here today. And it's no secret the topic over the last weeks, or not even just weeks, but months, has been drought. And we're glad to have David here with us to talk about just weather patterns. We talk about the different parts of agriculture and planting seasons and off seasons and growing seasons, and the weather patterns make a lot of difference to our growers and to everybody involved in ag. And we're going to pick your brain a little bit. Let's do it. Ready. We did prep him a little bit, but with our conversation, we never know which direction they may go. Oh boy. But I think he's ready for it. We're ready for it. We've got a whole list of questions. But on a serious note, with the drought that we've had recently, and not just currently, but I saw the other day where y'all listed 6 months of drought, basically. It's crazy. So and we keep hearing about rain that's supposed to come, that it misses us in the world of ag. Weather dictates a lot of what happens. Sure. What we do, a lot of planning, and Aaron can speak to that on the agronomy side. I mean, when it comes to when to plant, we had warm weather, but no rain. So he had a lot of calls recently about, can we go ahead and plant? Should we wait? So Aaron, I mean, maybe you want to touch on some of the phone calls you've gotten recently when it comes to planning time for planting.
Well, we had a fairly warm 1st of April. We actually had a lot of crops being planted when we typically don't plant that early. And we did have some moisture in the ground at that time. And now it's it's fallen off. And, we were really hoping to get a rain this weekend. There was a lot of cotton, especially, that was planted this past week. People, what we call dusting it in. Typically, you want to plant your cotton about 1 inch, maybe 1.5 inches at the most deep. Mm-hmm. But if you're planting into dry soil, then we'll shallow it up really shallow where it's just barely covered. That's called dusting it in. So we had a lot of that happened this past week, with a lot of folks kind of anticipating rain over the weekend. We didn't see that. So hopefully the soil temperature won't get too terribly high. And I know that's really kind of what's going on right now as far as the row crop situation. We got a lot of folks, talked to some people this morning. They side dressed their corn. They put their extra nitrogen fertilizer out there this past week, kind of thinking that the rain would be there to kind of incorporate that into the soil, or the corn could actually take up that nitrogen and use it to grow. So, not getting that rain over the weekends kind of put us behind a little bit, but at the end of the day, we still are sitting here at the day we're recording this on April the 27th. We're not, horribly far behind, as far as our planting calendar goes, at all. So, but like Micah said, if we don't see any measurable rainfall here in the next few days, next week or so, we're really going to be kind of in bad shape. So
let me touch on the weekend rain chances, because you said weekend rain, and I got a lot of that on Facebook this weekend, saying y'all said rain, and I was wondering, like, where's that coming from? Because the highest rain chances we had last week for the weekend was 30, 40 for Saturday, Sunday, and then it was lowered to 30 and 20. I'm like, okay, but this perception was it's going to rain a bunch this weekend. So I went back and I looked at the National Weather Service forecast.
Yeah.
And they had 70%, 80% chance of rain for the weekend.
Yeah.
So, and that's the forecast that gets disseminated to radio stations, to the apps, the default to the apps, that gridded forecast. So, it's just interesting because I was never really bullish on rain chances for the weekend, but that forecast, that gridded NWS forecast, is the one that really just gets disseminated more than anything else. So it's, I think, important to look at different sources of forecast information when you're trying to predict how much rain or if it's going to rain, because there's certainly a difference. And it's a challenge for me because I can put out a pretty good forecast and I get grouped into, well, you said 80%. No, I didn't. But so it's kind of like a no-win in that situation.
I will say this. I think with the advent of social media, things kind of get, because sometimes you'll see forecasts from other areas. And I know this past weekend, Birmingham, those areas were going to really get some good rainfall. So if you see something coming across your feed and you see this radar shot, projection coming across, oh, we're going to get rain this weekend. So I think that is one reason I think a lot of people did. But you mentioned something just then that I'm kind of curious about. And let me stop and say before we go too much further, I do appreciate what you do as a meteorologist, because this is my perception of what you do.
Sure.
You don't just throw numbers on the board and say, 30% chance rain for reading off the script.
Right.
I do appreciate the fact that you try to educate your audience as to why things are happening and what causes certain situations. And I think that's really a great attribute that you have from a meteorologist. I can't say that word. Meteorologist standpoint.
Yeah.
But what forecast do you view as some of the better, more accurate forecasts?
Yeah, that's a great question. And that was the point I wanted to get to. There is no master forecast. So there's a lot of misconception out there, like everyone draws from the same forecast pool and we just talk about it on TV.
Yeah.
That's not the way it is. Now, as I mentioned, the National Weather Service gridded forecast is kind of a master forecast, if you will, that goes to, again, some of the automated apps. But a real meteorologist will forecast based on what they look at in the computer models. So when I come to work, for example, I do a synoptic analysis, what's happening across the country, around the world, what are the patterns like, what are temperatures, satellite radar. And then I look at just a bunch of short-term and long-term computer models, raw data, and then I create my forecast. So I never look at the National Weather Service forecast. Like, I don't care what they say, what they do. Like, what I do and what I put out is in my head, my forecast for the Wiregrass, basically for the next 7 days. So yeah, it's different. I like to use kind of all the models put together. And as you forecast day to day, and even on weekends when I'm not technically working, I'm always working, so I'm always looking at the models. So you get to learn, number one, the climate locally, of course, and then you get to know how the models are performing, short range and long range. So when I forecast, I'm like, okay, what models are doing the best job? I go back, I look at model verification over the past 30 days or 90 days to see which models are doing the best. And then I'll lean more heavily on, for example, the AI version of the European model. So if you look at all the models, like the GFS, horrible. The European one, some really like, because it's to kind of stir that exactly right
fear and stir that, that Jerry Springer.
Yeah. It was a hurricane in January from the GFS. Let's put it out there and get all these shares on social media. You're right. The Jerry Springer effect. So yeah, if you look at the model performance, the GFS is horrible. The European is usually the best. And if you take it a step further, the AI version of the European model is even better than the operational European model. So I rely a lot on that when it comes to forecasting precipitation. So yeah, so what I put out there is experience, analysis, and then a compilation and blending of all the different models.
Well, you will appreciate this. I've talked to several different farmers every week, and a lot of times I'll hear a lot of people say, well, I know my app is saying this, but last night at 10 o'clock, David Paul said this, and that's what we're going with. So your words carry a lot of weight in the agriculture community. But it's very important what you do, because a lot of decisions are made in the farming world, whether it be how to spend money or not spend money. Do we need to put some kind of protectant out there for, it's going to sit in and rain for a few days,
Mm-hmm.
but we need to put something to protect our peanuts against a disease, or we have a weed problem in our cotton, well, it's supposed to rain the next few days, and that herbicide's supposed to stay on the plant for a minimum of 6 hours before it actually is taken up into the plant. So there's a lot of people put a lot of stock into what you're saying, and they have a tendency to spend a lot of money, or not spend money on what you say. So
No pressure.
yeah, no pressure.
I'm sweating already here.
But it does make a difference, though, when you have someone that's in touch with the local climate, the local weather patterns, and not just some prediction from somewhere hundreds of miles away, but people that are here that know this, that know just the ins and outs of this area too.
Yeah.
Everything from just coming off the river, or coming out of the Gulf, or coming out of the West, in this Wiregrass area. Seems like it has its own climate sometimes.
Yeah, definitely. And sometimes you get into a pattern like this, and the local climate creates like a wider climate. For example, it's dry, it tends to stay dry because you've got less moisture coming up from the soil. But I always think about farmers. I mean, I grew up in a small farming community, 650 people. So it was just surrounded by cornfields and soybean fields. And one of my first jobs when I was 13 was detasseling corn for Pioneer. Because, you got the male rows and the female rows, and, you're creating seed. That's right. So, I've always been in touch with the farming community.
Pretty damn. So what do you think, what's your kind of outlook? I know you've been saying a lot about, you see kind of a shift in the weather pattern coming up soon. So do you have is there any hope for our guys?
There's hope. There's hope. The month of May looks wetter. Going into the month of May, it looks wetter, and it looks a little bit cooler too. And that's kind of the shift that we need to see. We need to turn a little bit cooler and have that wind energy in the atmosphere come a little farther south, which usually doesn't happen too much as you get into May, because usually that shift is going northward and not southward. But this pattern is going to kind of correct itself a little bit, bring some of that wind energy southward. That should set up more of an active storm track across the south, which honestly, we haven't seen that since the middle of March. It's been really dry for the last month and a half. So there's some hope there, short term. Long term, the summer might not be real wet. I mean, we'll get the typical pop-up convection. You can almost guarantee to get some rainfall, in the summertime. But I think the biggest thing I'm seeing is, as we get towards the fall, the fact that an El Nino will be there. I put money on it, and it could be a very strong El Nino going into the fall and then winter. That usually means really wet weather across the deep south. So that's, I think, maybe good and bad, because of the harvest season might turn wet. But as far as replenishing soil moisture next winter, these El Nino winters, especially strong El Nino winters, tend to be very wet for us.
I've seen a lot on the kind of prediction of a super El Nino.
Right.
And just kind of walk us through what does that mean? Is because and my understanding is, we really can't predict the summertime as far as possibly just afternoon thunderstorms, things like that. But timing wise, when do we typically see that El Nino, or this potential super El Nino? When will that start?
Okay, so if we look at, what is El Nino, La Nina, the whole cycle is called El Nino Southern Oscillation. And it's determined by sea surface temperatures between South America and Australia in the Central Pacific. It's called Nino 3.4 region. So is the water temperature there above normal or below normal? And by how much above or below? So if it's 0.5 degrees Celsius or more below normal, it's a La Nina. If it's a half degree or more above normal Celsius, it's an El Nino. Right now, we're at basically zero. So we've gone from a La Nina to neutral. And that's one of the reasons we've been so dry these previous winters, because we've seen a lot of La Nina in the last, 8 years or so. And a La Nina for us is typically dry, which is one of the reasons it's been generally dry for the past several years. So we're transitioning to the El Nino, and it looks like as we go through June, July, we could very well at that point hit that 0.5 degree, abnormality on the warm side, which would kick us officially into El Nino. So then the question is, how high does that warm anomaly go? And some of the modeling coming out is +3. The European seasonal forecast is like +3.5 degrees. So that is when you're 3.5 degrees above normal in that Nino 3.4 region, that's the super El Nino. That's exceptional. Because normally in El Nino is your plus 1.5, 1.8 degrees. So if you're plus 2.5 or 3 or 3.5, it's almost double. So then you start looking at the strength of this potentially being as high as some of the most historical El Ninos that we have on record.
So how long is there a certain time frame that La Nina or El Nino exists? You mentioned La Nina, it was around for 8 or so years, and now it's trending upward. Um, is there any way to know how long the upward trend, downward trend will exist, or how long will the El Nino be around?
Yeah, typically the cycles are 6 months to 18 months. So we've been La Nina, came up to neutral, La Nina. So typically we've been on that La Nina side, so kind of fluctuating up and down. The El Nino, likely this one may last more like 12 months, 18 months, maybe for 24 months. Exactly. Because if you get that high, it takes a while for that to come back down. So it looks like the peak of it will be probably sometime November into December, January for this El Nino event. And then even if it comes down from there, you're talking another 8 months. So you're looking at 12 to 18 months in that window of potential El Nino.
So from summer to summer, just what summer you're
getting. Definitely. Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
So what, other than just the tilt of the earth, I mean, what can cause the sea temperatures to rise?
Usually it's a shift of high pressure, low pressure, and shifting of the trade winds. So if the winds are blowing in one direction, it creates upwelling. If the winds shift and blow in the other direction, it piles the warmer water from the west to the east, and that creates the warmer than normal water. So it's really just the winds out there that are shifting and creating the differences in the water temperature.
Interesting. So yeah, the water over there on the other side of South America.
That's crazy.
Well, in Australia, you found our peanuts.
It's crazy. I mean, you think about it.
Yeah.
But that's right on the money.
So you're thinking somewhere around November where we should start seeing kind of an uptick in precipitation.
Yeah, exactly. So I think we'll see the El Nino this summer, which may impact hurricane development and in the Caribbean out into the Atlantic. For us, if assuming that El Nino forms by the summertime, if you look at what happens during an El Nino hurricane season, if there are hurricane or tropical storms, they tend to be Louisiana towards the Big Bend of Florida. So there could be a little help from that in the growing season, August, September, maybe October. But then from the general supercharged subtropical jet that we see within El Nino, we're looking at, October, November, and then through the winter with that. Remember back to the Peanut Festival in 2015?
Yes.
When the parking lot became a muddy mess? El Nino. That was El Nino.
Was paved now.
Yeah, definitely. Because of that El Nino. Exactly, yeah.
I would say, just from a agronomic standpoint, May is typically, this is very generalized here, when we try to get everything planted.
Yeah.
August for our cotton and peanut crop is probably the highest water demand, in that month. If you had to pick 4 weeks out of the whole growing, 140 to 150 day growing season, the month of August is typically October is when we try to get everything harvested. So I was just kind of curious from rainfall standpoint. Typically the first half of November seems like it's not quite as wet. But if we're looking at something like this, our guys may want to try to focus on getting everything harvested a little sooner. And not be relying on those late November, early December harvest dates, especially for our cotton crop.
And then on that note, you would want to plant a little bit early.
Yeah,
maybe.
Exactly.
But now you can't plant early if you don't have a ton of moisture in the soil. But so you're kind of, dry to begin the season, wet to end the season. So when is that sweet spot?
That's why you're here today.
Yeah, exactly. There's some hope. Now I do feel better about these rain chances coming up towards the end of the week. So what is in the ground now, if you haven't gotten that rainfall, and there was some over the weekend, Pike to Barber counties and some in the Panhandle, but not real widespread. So that moisture that comes in, and there's a chance, almost every day this week, but more so towards the end of the week, Friday into Saturday, that could be enough moisture to kind of, get that germination going. And then hopefully that crop will do okay, because I think this May, even though May is typically our second driest month of the year, the fact that this pattern is shifting a little bit, like we've seen in some of these previous Mays, we've had some wet Mays recently. That could be the case again this month of May coming up.
I've thought about this before, and I'm just kind of curious what your take is. From a calendar standpoint, we say May is the second driest month. Does it ever seem like, or could there be anything to the fact that it seems like we may be a little ahead on the calendar? Like April was like what we typically have in May or something like that.
Yeah, sometimes it does seem like it shifts a little bit. Yes.
I just didn't know if I was crazy.
No.
You're right. Kind of seems like we've kind of moved the calendar a little bit.
Yeah.
I do have one other question for you. As far as the weather, as it relates to growing crops and things like that. Sometimes when we get through these prolonged droughts in the summertime, we don't see those afternoon pop-up thunderstorms. And typically it's just because of high pressure systems sitting right over our region or something like that. So what causes the high pressure system just to come camp out over our area and not move? Or does that question make sense?
Yeah, it does. A lot of it goes back to what the mid to upper level wind pattern is, more or less. And that goes back to some of the larger scale circulations at play, like El Nino, La Nina, where it kind of determines on where these ridges and troughs set up. And these patterns can get locked in place for months and months and months on end. So you've got different, not just ENSO, but you've got the North Atlantic Oscillation, all these different oscillations that are in play all the time. And it's kind of like a baseball game. If like you've got the bad pitcher and the good batter up and, speed on the bases, so it's all like the combination of all those different factors that can create a certain situation that kind of stays locked in place.
So even if your best batters are on and you have a really good pitcher, it really doesn't matter.
Exactly.
Exactly. Yeah. So, that's interesting. That's just thoughts that have crossed my mind over the past several years, and just weather fascinates me, and I do appreciate all you do, especially during severe weather, tornadoes. I have learned a lot just by watching y'all's broadcast, about the echoes and hooks and stuff like that.
I love that, man.
I'm kind of a dork when it comes to that kind of stuff, and I make my kids watch it too. I'm like, there it is. Yes. All right, look for the green and the red. Yeah. So I appreciate all you do, and don't listen to the folks who are fussing about breaking into the football game.
Man.
I know y'all caught some grief from that.
Yeah.
Y'all, this is life and death situation. This football game is
multiple confirmed tornadoes on the ground, and people
complaining about it. You guys that scored or not? I guess that's what's priority here.
So, yeah,
it is. And similar between extension and meteorology, we're all data geeks. We all look at numbers. We all look at trends. We all like to see what's coming. And, we have some pretty geeked out conversations.
Oh yeah, I can imagine.
Anything else that
I do have one other question for you. How many suits do you own?
I think 30 some.
Oh, 30 some.
30 some.
Oh, I thought
yeah.
you were going to say
no,
3.
not 3. Yeah, 30 some altogether.
I've often wondered that because y'all usually, if you're on TV a lot, you can't have the same.
Right. Yeah.
On, so
I've got multiple.
I was just curious. I didn't know.
Well, he gets the best dressed award for the
podcast. For certain.
Beautiful.
I guess you're on the way into the station.
Yeah, and to start forecasting, and I'm hoping for the rain, working on the rain. Hoping for this pattern to change, and
because if it doesn't rain, it's your fault.
Yeah, I know.
That's right.
And then it's going to rain too much, and guess whose fault it is at that point.
That's right. Everybody wants to be the weatherman because you can be wrong most of the time, and you still have the jobs. That's what I always hear farmers say.
Yeah, I hear that a lot. I don't like to be wrong. I'm a competitive person by nature, so I want to put out the best forecast possible. Yeah. And the thing about forecasting is, I've done this now. I was 97 my first year, so 29 years. I've learned so much over time, but the way to keep learning is to keep kind of doing a post-mortem on your forecast. And if you mess up, what didn't you see that you could have seen that could have produced a better forecast? Because if you get stuck in whatever your job is, going back to baseball, if you're just like a batter and you just get I'm as good as I'm going to be, putting some extra time in the cages, whatever it is, you got to keep pushing your trade to get better and better. So, the competitive nature of me, I want to put out the best forecast. And the other the hard thing for me and other meteorologists is when we put out a rain chance, for example, 30%, what does that mean? Because you're really trying to incorporate the chance of rain blowing up somewhere in our viewing area, the percentage of the area that gets rain, the aerial coverage, and then somehow that how much is going to fall is incorporated in that number as well. So it's kind of 3 very different variables that you're trying to sum up in one number and then make people understand what that one number means. And it's very, very hard. I've got some concept ideas in my head that I'm going to work on this year. That's a graphic that will kind of take all those different pieces and then put it into a number that might make more sense for the farming community, especially because if you're just worried about, my backyard picnic, that's one thing. If you're worried about, you've got all this money in
Yeah.
cotton seeds going into the ground. You want that rain or
That's
the
right.
herbicide. I mean, that's a different ball game. A lot of money on the line. So a graphic that would be more catered to the farming community that would have more of that
Yeah,
information.
we looking at a 15-minute rainstorm and everything's going to be you know.
Yeah, that's
cleared out.
the duration part is
can,
another
You can
part of
bring
it.
your picnic back
Yeah.
out after that, or no, we really actually need, you know, an inch of rain
Yeah.
here. So,
Yeah.
But yeah, that would definitely be helpful.
Yep. Like Saturday, go back to Saturday, it did rain. About 30% of the area got rain.
Yeah.
But unless you were in that area, you,
And when you're in
missed it.
drought and you've got no rain and people see 30%,
Yeah.
that's a big,
Yeah.
that's a big chance of rain after
Yeah.
0%.
Exactly.
That also means there's 70% chance it's not going to
Yeah.
rain.
Yeah.
Now on the flip side, if you say 30% chance in the summertime, people immediately think, oh, it's not going to rain.
Yeah.
You know.
There it is.
But yeah, now in the drought, 30% is like, yeah, it's going to rain. We've got hope.
Yeah, I was over at a softball game recently, a high school softball game over in Ashford, and you know, it was, all of a sudden this random cloud just dropped right on us.
Yeah.
And you know, it kind of affected the game a little bit, but nobody cared. It was
Yeah.
like, okay, we're
We'll
good
take
with
it.
Like, we'll take it.
Yeah.
Is there anything else, David, that you got going on, or anything that's of interest that might be of interest to the?
I will say one thing on the severe weather note and tornadoes, you know, specifically. What I've noticed, and I've not gone really in depth in it. I mean, I've done the tracks. If you look at tracks over history, there seems to be certain alleyways in the Wiregrass that are more tornado prone than other areas. And I'd have to do a lot of research to figure out exactly what it is every single setup. But my theory is that the topography and the terrain is creating certain alleyways where the shear is enhanced and it produces more tornadoes. And it would depend on the wind flow.
It seems like the
Doesn't it?
same
It
towns
seems
get
like
hit.
Yes.
right north
every
of
time.
Cottonwood may be one of those
Oh, yeah.
alleyways.
Yep.
To me, it
Exactly.
seems like that area gets hit a lot.
And that's that border of Henry and Houston.
Yep,
that
exactly.
area there.
Yep.
Out towards Hellberg.
Tumbles
Seems
through
like
Yep.
Hellberg can't
Yep.
catch a break ever.
And then Wicksburg to the west, northwest
Yeah.
side of Dothan is another little corridor down into Geneva
That
County.
would be a really interesting step.
Yeah.
would be.
But it kind of makes sense 'cause if you've got wind flow over subtle terrain differences and the winds in the atmosphere, every time that certain wind structure sets up, it just enhances the helicity, we call it, in the atmosphere, and then it can produce a little corridor. So I'm pretty sure there's a topographical influence to it.
Now, I will say there's a lot of people on the west side of Dothan that farm in the eastern half of Geneva County, western Houston County. I don't know how much they would believe it or not, but a lot of people, whether jokingly or they were serious about, I think it was a little of both, they would always say, well, the weather, you know, the rain's coming out of the west, moving east, and it gets to us in splits.
Yeah.
And they would always blame it on Dothan, on the circle, you know, producing all the heat. So the weather would just split and go south or north, and anyway, so. But there's probably a lot more scientific backing what you're saying than.
I found some arrowheads in my yard, probably from the Choctawhatchee Indians back in the day. So I'm like, maybe the Indians had
Maybe they knew.
knew something, and that was like that. I don't know.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
You can't release your findings though. Then
I know.
certain folks' insurance rates are going to go through the roof.
Right. Yeah, but there are certain things at play that you know, and I think the topography is part of it, and you know, we really haven't seen a lot of those big widespread rain events where like everyone gets it. So the one thing you want to look for, you know, if you want rain, you want southwesterly winds, mid to upper levels. If we ever get that kind of a setup to occur, whether it's winter or summertime, that usually means a lot of rain. So that's the key, that jet stream, mid to upper level from the west southwest or from the southwest. If you see that setting up, then you can, you know, feel pretty good about rain chances for us. Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've learned a lot this afternoon.
Yeah.
I appreciate you guys having me on.
appreciate you
Yeah,
coming.
I mean, this has been pretty neat for us. We're the same way. We like learning new stuff, and we look at people like you and other people in our community that have the expertise. And Extension does a lot, but at the same time, there's a lot of good resources in our community. You are one of them. And,
Very good.
We appreciate everything that all the information we can get as well. It helps us with what we do.
Yeah. Hey, anything I can do to help, I'm here to help. I love this community, love being here. So
We're proud to have you, I will say.
Thank you.
Are we doing ties next time?
Maybe so, maybe not.
Especially-
I don't know that we could fit in the same suit, but he's probably got a suit with it.
Yeah, 30 it's one for every day of the month.
That's right.
If we have him back on, we'll wear ties in honor.
Yeah, that's right.
I like the Auburn shirt though. You can't complain about that.
Yeah, well, you got 30 suits. I got 30 Auburn.
Yeah.
This is our suit. This is our suit and tie. Right here. But if we're good,
Yeah.
got it.
Appreciate you coming by today.
Thanks,
Really
guys.
do.
We
Enjoyed
appreciate it. Yeah.
Yeah, glad to
Appreciate
have
it.
you.
Yeah.
Again, thanks to everybody for dropping in and listening to David. A lot of good information. We'll go and keep an eye on this El Nino system, and hope you can stop by next time. Have a great day.